Hey guys, David Folk here, and today we have another episode of Geek Speak.
Geek Speak.
And today we're going to be talking about something that I know a lot of people struggle with. I've seen a lot of golfers come into the store having no clue how to purchase this item and what all of it means and how to best get fit for it. So today we're talking about bounce. And that's going to be specifically tied to wedges. So let's go putts around.
Hit the ball! Boom.
As we talk about bounce, there's so many things that are swirling around. So a couple of things we want to address. Number one, what is bounce? Number two, how does it affect your game? And number three, which bounce should you actually choose? Number one, what is bounce? Bounce is the degree between the actual bottom of the club and the leading edge. I have my cool 60 degree here, and the bounce on this is 4 degrees. This is where the bottom of the club is, this line right here. And if I make it straight, you guys can see that there's an angle between where my finger is and the leading edge. That is going to be what we call the bounce. It's that degree between the actual bottom of the club and the leading edge. Everybody thinks when they set down the club, they just set it down with the leading edge just touching the ground, but that's actually not the case. Most club manufacturers make a bounce, especially when you play game improvement, super game improvement. Most club manufacturers make a bounce on the club that's more like a 56, which if we see here, is the number 14. Here, let me turn it up this way. 14. Specific wedges come with specific bounces. If you look at a 50 degree has more of a medium bounce in between like 6 and 12. The 52 has a little bit higher, 10 to like 16 or 14. The 56 also has that same range. And then you get down to a 60, and a 60 can go from 4 to 8. And that's in general, right? Manufacturers kind of make what they think is the best bounce for them. So you have to look at your specs depending upon what you're looking for. And they mostly go up in 2 degree increments. Like Cleveland uses a dot system. Vokey shows the numbers on the club here. Mizuno writes their numbers as well. So it kind of just depends on how the manufacturer decides what bounces they want. But generally there's a spectrum for a low bounce, a average bounce, and a high bounce. Tip number 2, which bounce should you choose? It kind of depends on like 4 factors. Number 1, the ground conditions. Is it hard ground? Is it soft ground? Is it tall grass? Do you play in burnt areas? Number 2, what kind of swing do you have? Do you have a shallow swing, a steep swing? Number 3, it's going to be how you like to hit the ball. Are you a picker of the ball? Are you a digger of the ball? Number 4, performance. What do you want to get out of your wedges is going to depend upon what kind of bounce you guys are looking for. When we talk about bounce, we're going to talk about a spectrum. We're going to go from how you strike the ball, and then we're going to add the variables. If you're a picker, generally speaking, you want to have a lower bounce. That way you can get into it instead of the club hitting and then bouncing up and coming into the ball and you hit a blade or a skull or whatever happens. If you're more of a digger, you want more of a higher bounce, and that's going to allow you to come into the ground, take your divot, but then the ground's going to hit the bottom of the club and bounce up, so you're not going to take like this massive 4-inch divot, basically break the wrist. The club's naturally going to bounce against the ground and then come up through the turf again. So a higher bounce, if you're a digger, is going to be a better option. I really want to encourage you guys, as you get into wedges, you understand the bounce. In order to understand what bounce is best for you, you have to consider how you hit the ball. Number 2, you have to consider what the ground is going to be like. If you're playing in some really thick, lush areas that the grass is always tall, maybe a bigger bounce is better for you than a lower bounce. If you're playing in hard pan, thin cut, everything is basically dirt, a lower bounce is going to be a better option for you. Now, we come to actually chipping, half shots, those types of things. A higher bounce when it comes to that is more difficult to chip than it is with a lower bounce. And this is why, even though I'm a digger of the ball, I choose to have a 60-degree 4 bounce here. I like the fact that I can close my face down and get through it here, or if I can take a full shot, it's going to get down into it. I like being able to dig with this, especially on half-quarter chips around the green shots, as opposed to something like my 56 that has a much higher bounce. I have found that when I try to chips and half shots with a 60 that has a higher bounce, I have a tendency to thin blade a lot more than I do with the 4 bounce. So that's why, even though I'm a digger of the ball, I try to have especially a lower bounce on my 60 degree. Let's talk about the thing that befuddles people the most. Grinds. I like the idea of being able to have different types of grinds. But in order to find which one is best for you, you have to understand the typical ideas of it. This is going to be what was called a typical grind. The idea is that you have a thin sole here that is going to have no grind whatsoever. This is your typical wedge, how it works. The idea of a grind is to allow you to manipulate shots a little more. If you want to try and hit a little bit of a higher shot with this wedge, in order to do that, if it's like this, you want to open it up. You can see that my leading edge raises here as I open up the blade. That causes you to have more effective bounce as you come through the ground. And you can see if you don't get down underneath the ball and in the grass enough, you're going to thin it. That's why some of them have shaved this portion off. And that's why I went with this kind of wedge for my 60. This is going to be grinded off by Titleist. The idea is you have it here and you can see as I lay it down, I'm on the grind now and it's not near as high as it was on the 60. So the idea is as you come through it, you're not going to have as high a leading edge, so it's not going to be as difficult to hit that open shot or the flop shot or whatever you're trying to do. Grinds, really that's all they're there for, is to try and prevent the leading edge from sticking up so high. So if you're hitting a flop shot or you're hitting a little bit higher shot that's going to be a little bit more delicate, you're not going to have to try and get down into the ground as much. You can use the bounce here, which isn't nearly as much as, let's say, the 56 here. So you guys can see how much that is compared to this guy here. I hope, guys, that helps you out with bounce, why it's important to understand what the bounce is, how grinds work in relationship to the bounce, and which bounce would be best for you. If you guys have any questions, go ahead, put those comments down below. I look forward to hearing from you about what kind of wedges you use, what kind of bounces you use, what kind of grinds do you use. Are you a picker? Are you a digger? Let's have that great in-depth conversation about wedges. This is a very difficult subject for a lot of people to understand. So if you see some people out there that are having struggles, go ahead, help them out. Point them to this video or meet them in the golf store and talk to them about different types of grinds, different types of bounces, and how it all correlates to their swing. Thanks for hanging out with me with another episode of Geek Speak.
Geek Speak.
And we'll chat with you next time.